Welcome to another edition of the Dean Legge Show here on Dog Post. Let's wrap up Georgia's game with Notre Dame and look forward from here on out. So Saturday night, Georgia with the 23-17 win over the Irish. It was very similar to the game in South Bend in that Georgia felt like Georgia was a better team for the bulk of the game, or more in South Bend, but in this case, Georgia just couldn't get around the first quarter. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the win itself gives Georgia the best win in college football so far this season. Notre Dame is still ranked number 10 after the loss. They're 2-1. They've got a real big game with Virginia, who is also ranked. I believe they host Virginia. Virginia's number 18 in the country. So let's see if Notre Dame can hold on and keep rolling. From here on out, they've got a schedule that's advantageous for them, mainly because they're good. They surprised me. I think they surprised a lot of people, certainly plenty of national folks, and maybe to some degree Las Vegas. But if you look closer at what happened during the game changed really fundamentally at a point that I think most people didn't think that it did. And that was right after the muff punt by Tyler Simmons. Georgia really turned it on from that point forward. It didn't feel like it, but the next drive they scored a touchdown. And also, too, I know a lot of people watched Legge's thoughts after the game and listened to Riding Home. I am going to say this again about Tyler Simmons. You're just not going to get me saying anything bad about him because he's been such a good player for such a long time. The fact that he dropped that ball, it's probably not going to happen again this season. And when you're a punt return guy, these things happen occasionally. I mean, Mecole Hardman had that one against Auburn. That was decisive in that game. So for Georgia, a win, playing conservatively the bulk of the game, it worked, actually. I mean, I think if you want to quibble with some of the coaching stuff, that's fine. I'm not real comfortable fighting the coaching thing too much because, I mean, I've never been a college football coach, and it's hard to really make great arguments about that sometimes when you don't have a history of being a college football coach. But sometimes it's obvious. Last night, I didn't think it was so obvious that Georgia was making wrong decisions. If you want to say they got out coached, I think there is an argument for that. But like going forward on the fourth down, I probably would have gone for it on the fourth down, but I don't think kicking the field goal was a wrong choice. I mean, at the end of the day, the strategy worked. Kirby was betting correctly that Notre Dame was not going to drive the field twice to score touchdowns to win. If you go for it there, you don't have to drive the field to kick a field goal, and particularly after that punt, they were almost in field goal position. So looking back on it, it wasn't the way necessarily I would have done it, but I think the results speak for themselves, and they won the game. Back to the Tyler Simmons situation. As Notre Dame scored on their sixth play, or I think it was their sixth play from the 5-yard line in to go up 7-0 and get the first score of the game, Notre Dame had 25 plays to Georgia's 11. Notre Dame had 115 yards to Georgia's 34. So Georgia had, at that stage, only 2 drives, and this was Notre Dame's fourth. Notre Dame was kicking to Georgia for Georgia to have their third drive, and then all of a sudden Notre Dame gets the ball, steals a possession, scores a touchdown on top of that. So 25-11, Notre Dame is up in the plays. 115-34, they're up in the yardage. So that matters, obviously. And then they get up 7-0. From that point forward in the game, it didn't feel like it in that moment. But from that point forward in the game, Georgia, of course, the next drive comes down, a long drive to score. From that point forward, Georgia has 48 plays to Notre Dame's 36. Georgia has 305 yards to Notre Dame's 206. Georgia scores 23 points to Notre Dame's 10. That's what that game felt more like than the 23-17 final. And I just think it's important to talk about that because it shows how important any one particular play can be in a ball game. And it also shows how Georgia really did do about what Las Vegas expected when you don't talk about the fumbled punt return. So Tyler has been so good in punt return, you can't get super annoyed that a mistake happened. Now, on the punt situation for Georgia, they are going to have to get better production there, or it's just not going to work out. You maybe look at change there, or you just say to the kid, hey, look, we believe in you, we trust you, the pressure's on. That's fine. That's why you're here. We need you to perform. And it's that. And if it doesn't happen, then you replace them. No need to be difficult about it. A lot of stuff from that game. I spent the whole post game talking or taking in Notre Dame's press conference. I did want to show this clip right now of Brian Kelly talking about how physical the game was.
It was a physical game. Both sides of the ball. You could hear it out there. The physicality was real. Probably one of the most physical games that I've coached against any team that I've had compete. It's a lot of games that I've coached. So
for people like me who are on the sideline all the time, physicality is one thing, and a lot of times I get asked about noise or the crowd. It's hard for me to tell with the crowd with noise, ambient noise. Physicality on the field, Georgia just is very physical, and I think I've just gotten used to it in this fourth year of Kirby. I mean, they've always been a physical team, generally speaking, and Mark Richt, whoever. I mean, they're a big SEC team. But with Kirby and them, it's even more. And that's why the numbers I talked about earlier, 305 yards to 206. 48 plays to 36, 23 to 10 in the score. That's where you really took the game over. And at halftime, Georgia, this is the first time Georgia had been losing at the half since the Texas game. And more so than that, last season in 2018, they were only trailing at the half twice. And that was at the half they were only trailing twice. And if you want to correct me, that's fine. I could be wrong because at the Florida game, Georgia was winning and then got down right after the half. So the Texas game, obviously they were trailing at the half. The LSU game, they were trailing at the half. They lost both of those games. They were winning against Alabama and then lost the game. So Alabama came back in the fourth quarter to win. The Gators got the lead in the third quarter, and Georgia just zoomed past them a little bit like they did with Notre Dame in this game. I think sometimes when you struggle and you have to fight, that win will mean a lot for Georgia because it will, they know now they can come back and win a game. Brian Kelly's group has struggled to come back and win games in his time. Usually when you're losing in the fourth quarter, you lose. But in this case for Georgia, in the second half, or if you're losing in the second half, usually you lose. But for Georgia now, coming back in this game, the win over Florida, they had to come back in the second half. Now this win over Notre Dame had to come back in the second half. When you're dealing with the high-powered offenses of Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama, and certainly LSU now, those guys are going to score points. You may be losing. It's better to be a front runner. Believe me, it's more fun. It's easier. But Georgia really had to look in the mirror hard on Saturday night. And they responded. One reason they had such a great ability to respond, though, is the crowd. The crowd, when I was at Georgia, was not very good. Part of that was because the teams were good but not great. And now the crowd really does matter. And I was reading a lot on Dawg Posts today about the crowd and was it as crazy as 2004 LSU? Was it as nuts as Auburn blackout in 2007? I don't know. I mean, again, on the field, it's harder to tell a lot of things. But what happened was the university, the institution, started changing things. They didn't rely on the crowd to self-lather themselves. Those lights, they make a huge difference because it energized the crowd in a way that, the band or a song might not. It was the combination of everything. And you're going to see everybody do this. Alabama's got this coming soon too. But if you want a home field advantage, that right there is something you gotta have it. And for Georgia to have the ability to do that was huge. So let's listen to what Kirby had to say about the noise, the atmosphere, and everything. It really did make a huge difference.
Sanford Stadium now has special effects like never before. What did you kind of think of that, and how much were you kind of paying attention to all that? I know you got a game.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I was worried the power went out a couple times. I didn't blink. As long as my headphones worked, I was good. What an incredible atmosphere, and it seems like we say the same thing over and over each time we come in here, but our fans are by far the best in the country, and this is why you come to UGA. When you get an opportunity to play in an atmosphere like that, in an environment like that, it was really incredible. Oh, unbelievably important. I mean, you think about that game, you think about the botched snap on the one drive. I mean, they impacted the game tonight more than I've ever seen a game impacted, not only here but anywhere, where they just affected the game with the false starts and the different things, and it burnt their timeouts. You know, it's a different game if they're calling timeout at the end of the game to get the right play, right personnel, you know, maybe get guys fresh. And now they don't have them, and the clock's running because they burned them earlier because of the crowd noise caused them to. So it was definitely the 12th man today, and we certainly needed it.
Well, now you got the off week for the Dawgs. The ability, I mean, I know I need an off week. It looks, I might not look that bad right now, but I went to bed at about 6 o'clock in the morning. We didn't leave Sanford Stadium until about 2 o'clock. So this is just kind of common for those of us who have a bunch of photos and just aren't just writers, that you've got a lot of stuff to go through. So it's a long night. You know, Notre Dame probably didn't get home until 3 o'clock Eastern, I guess. But now you get the week off. Georgia's been going 8 straight weeks. I mean, from the beginning of August till now. It's time for a break. I love these 2 break week years. It really helps. So now the beginning of your season is over. You're undefeated, 4-0. You've done what you got to do. Now you got to deal with this little section here, which is, you know, beating teams you're supposed to beat in Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Get the week off again, and you got the Gators, a team totally Georgia should beat. But, you know, Florida will be a top 15, top 20 team. That's a huge opportunity for Georgia. And then you roll into the end of the season where it's looking like Auburn is the real test. It's going to be a road game. Everyone knows how loud, and, well, maybe you don't know, but Auburn's extremely loud. It's a tough place to play. Probably the toughest that Georgia, well, it's definitely the toughest that Georgia consistently goes to because Tennessee's not good right now. So Auburn's tough. They'll have to really play well. And that's the other thing. Georgia didn't play well last night, and they still won. They didn't win going away, but boy, they had the chance to win going away, and it just didn't happen. So part of that's a good thing. You know, when your shot's not going down and you still win, that's good. You just got to keep fighting. I think Notre Dame is pretty good. I'm, you know, the quarterback is legit for sure. They couldn't run. It cost them. It killed them. And again, at the end of the day, for me, it was the flipping of everything. You know, 25-11. Notre Dame has that many yards, or excuse me, plays to Georgia's, and then it goes to 48-36 for the Dawgs. It goes from 115-34 for the Irish to 305-206 for Georgia. The game changed as soon as Georgia took possession of the ball and drove it to tie. That's when the game changed. It felt like it changed sort of somewhere beside that point, maybe when Georgia got up 20-10 or 20, whatever it was. It was that moment. It just didn't feel like it because it was the cheap score for the Irish. It would be nice too for Georgia to get some cheap scores. They've not gotten a lot of cheap scores. They played great against Arkansas State, and they got some cheap scores that way. But Notre Dame's defense, again, I talked about this a lot, they do not allow people the ability to score. And Georgia could have gotten over 30 last night, but some of the touchdowns became field goals, and that was the difference between 31-17 and 23-17, and you were holding on. So I don't know. Stay tuned. Go to Dawg Post, DAWGPOST. Subscribe right there. Do that and watch the next video.